Hello again and welcome to part 4 of my series, Creating Digital Stories in Adobe Illustrator. So now that we've figured out how to set up our workspace in Adobe Illustrator and how to find free materials online to incorporate into our digital stories, I'm now going to take some time to dive into the Adobe Illustrator toolbar. So for this lesson, we are going to learn 10 tools and one design technique to create digital stories in Adobe Illustrator. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to first drag these off temporarily, and I'm going to open up a layer that I created some custom shapes, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So the 10 tools that we're going to look at in Adobe Illustrator include the selection tool. So over here, I'm also going to call it the black arrow tool. And then right next to it is the direct selection tool. So the second tool we'll be learning. We're going to learn the pen tool, which is slightly below it. We're going to learn the type tool, which is right below it. And we're going to learn the line segment tool. I put L and then segment together for leg. So the line segment tool, we looked at this one earlier, but this is our shape tool, and if you click on it and hold it, you'll kind of get this little library of tools, and typically it's always going to be set to your rectangle tool. So we're going to be using the shape tool, and then we're going to go down and we're going to use the Artboard tool as well. Now, before I get into anything else on the art toolbar, I want you all to go up to Window, and I want you to go down to Align. So we're going to open up this tab. And I'll show you what Align does here in a moment, but Align is very important to center all of your lines if you're creating a very symmetrical layout on your pages. So Align tool will be your best friend, and we'll also be using it in Adobe InDesign. So the last two things I want to show you on the art toolbar are your fill, which is kind of here where the pink box is. Typically it's set to white and black. So if you hover over fill and then your stroke. Stroke is also synonymous with line. I don't know why they call it stroke, but if you click on stroke, it will come to the front, and this is very important to note, and we'll go through that here in just a little bit. So those are the 10 tools we'll be looking at, and the one technique that I want to teach you is called clip masking, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. So starting with the first tool I introduced, the selection tool, and we've used it in the previous videos. So what happens, I'm going to zoom on these shapes so you guys can see. So the black arrow tool essentially will grab the full shape, and it will, or object or graphic or whatever you have, the black arrow tool will select it all for you. Okay, so what sets the direct selection tool apart from the selection tool is, let me zoom in on my pink star for a second. I just moved some of those objects out of the way so you can see it better. Notice how this star has points. These are called anchors, and let me zoom in very closely. There's nothing super special about them, it's just like there are points. So I'm going to click and drag this particular point and zoom in on it. So I'm going to hover over it, and it's literally just an anchor point. That's what it says, is an anchor point. So let me zoom back out so you can see the full shape. So every vector graphic will be comprised of points, and you can just click on the shape or whatever graphic you have with the direct selection tool, so the white arrow tool, and it will reveal all of its points. So why is that very special? If you want to get very detailed custom shape, click and drag a point, or you can click on it. You can just move an isolated part of your shape. Let's go ahead and do that with this. Oops, if I can click and drag that. So you can make very custom, unique shapes and so on and so forth. You can even, there's this new feature too. If you see this little round, I don't know what you want to call it, like tab thing, I don't know its technical name. If you grab it and you pull on it, it will round some corners for you. You can do that with just one as well. If you click and drag and highlight just a single point, So this is how you would get very unique custom shapes out of the pre-made shape inventory under your shapes tool. So that's what sets apart your selection tool and your direct selection tool. Your direct selection tool could move stuff around, but I would just caution you to use your selection tool so that way you make sure you grab everything in your graphic. So let's go over back to our little sheep vector graphic. Same thing here. So this is where the direct selection tool comes in handy. Let's say I didn't like the sheep looking that way and I wanted it to look up. So this is exactly how you would get those really fine details if you wanted to edit like a vector graphic, a pre-made vector graphic. Oops, don't do that. All right, so now that you've seen what the direct selection tool can do and what it's capable of, let's go ahead and jump over to our pen tool. So the pen tool is how you would make extremely custom shapes, and this is how I made these two shapes. If you have a photograph that you would like to trace, if you scanned somebody's artwork in and you want to copy the line work, using your pen tool would help. I'm going to go ahead and click let's put green again so you guys can see what I'm going to make. So plotting a point with your pen tool will start the beginning of whatever shape. So I'm just going to make some weird random shape. And let me zoom in so you guys can see a little bit better. And so when you start making your shape, it's not automatically whole in that it's not connected around the sides. And all you got to do is hover on your first plotted point. And here, let me zoom in so you guys can see this even better. And you'll notice that there's all of a sudden, this little icon below your pen tool. It's like a full circle. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. So now you have a full shape. Let me zoom back out. So that's how you would create custom shapes. And since we're on the topic of fill and stroke, I'm going to go ahead and jump down here and explain these two before we proceed any further along the toolbar. So when I click on any shape, you'll notice that they're automatically populated by the color that they are. You guys already know when you want to change the fill color, which is the color inside of an object, this is how you would go over here to your swatches, or you can do something up here. And the same technique could be applied. Let's say I'm going to use my direct selection tool, click on the sheep's body. For some reason, let's make him pink. That's exactly how you would do it. And make sure your fill color is in front. Remember how we clicked stroke and it came to the front? Well, the stroke, you can also edit the color. So I'm going to do the same thing, and I'll make this red. I will make this one pink. Can't really see that actually. Here, let me make it a different color. I'll make it orange. And up here, let me go ahead and make it brown. So this is how you would change the color of the outline of the shape, and its technical name is stroke. So I'm going to jump back over to our sheep, and let's just say I wanted the outside yellow. It would do that for me. So fill is the inside of a shape and stroke is the outside. And make sure you're very cautious. So let's say I'm like this and I wanted to change my line stroke color to yellow and I don't have stroke in front, it will change the fill instead. Anyway, I'm not going to get too technical. You can hit the swap fill to swap both colors. You'll notice that this shape right here has a thicker line than these two shapes, and that's very easy to edit. So again, make sure your stroke option is in the front. And what you're going to do is go up here so you can see stroke. And this is how you would edit the thickness or the weight of your lines. So you can make them very thick. Ooh, that's too crazy. Tone it down. Okay. Or you can completely make it super thin that it's barely noticeable. Here, let me zoom in so you can see that. This is 0.25 width. All right, so that's how you color shapes, and you color the outlines, the strokes of your shapes, your custom shapes. That includes any type of graphics, vector graphics you download from Pixabay or any other source for that matter. All right, so jumping down to the next tool on the toolbar that I would like for you guys to go over is the type tool. So jumping on the type tool, you're going to notice you can click and drag wherever you're making a text box. And you'll notice it will auto-populate some gibberish for you that is nonsensical, so don't bother reading it. I'm going to, if I can type my name right, hit Kaylene's workshop, part 4. And I'm going to click off. And so, as with any other software program out there, you can edit what type of font you use. You can edit, the size if you want it to be, italic, bold. And I'm going to go up here to increase the size. This is how you quickly add text to your documents in your digital story. And then again, just click it. You can also just click anywhere on the document, and that's essentially how you get text. And these are also vectors, so you could increase the size and it will retain its shape. So that's quickly how to use the text tool. And now we're going to jump over to the line segment tool. And this is incredibly important, especially here. Let me get rid of my awesome shapes. This is very important if you are interested in making comics. So I'm going to grab the line segment tool. Make sure you come down here and make sure you have a stroke color. I'm going to make it black for this. And I forgot to mention this, but when you're coloring things, you can actually make them transparent or like see-through by just clicking, for example, the fill color. You can go over here and hit none, or you can hover down here and hit none as well. Here, let me show you an example. So, where's my text? Okay, so I'm going to bring this to the front by hitting right click and going to arrange to bring to the front so it's in front of my text. This is only applicable if your shapes and your text and whatever you're trying to put in front is on the same layer. So I'm going to grab this and then I'm going to hit none. So you can see that it's see-through. So now I have a color in it and then I click none. So now it's see-through. All right, so that's how I would want you to set up your line segment tool, because you don't want to fill color in case it shows up in an unexpected way. So your line tool, you're going to get your crosshair and you're going to click and drag. Hold the shift key to get perfect symmetrical lines. So let's just say I wanted to make this a comic book page. And I just noticed that my little hello actually has nothing in it too. So if I wanted to hover over this, you'll see that everything within it is see-through, but besides the point. All right, so I'm sitting here, I'm going to draw up my comic template, and it's not going to be super perfect at this time. So let's just say I do something like this. All right, so this is how you would set up very quickly comic panel lines. And again, I would like you to make them maybe thicker than 1 point. So, you can click and drag all of them so they'll become the same, or they'll have the same effects on them. So I'm going to hit 4. Maybe I'll make them thicker. And using your selection tool, you can edit them. Using your direct selection tool, you could actually grab just 1 point of them and you could edit just one section of it. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little more defined. And don't worry if your lines are outside of the art box, or the artboard, excuse me. We'll save it in a way that everything outside of the artboard is clipped. So no worries about that. So this is how you would quickly set up some comic panels. You could also use, and you can do the same effect that I did with the squares up here by just going over to your rectangle tool, holding shift, and then doing that. To make quick copies, you can just go copy, edit, paste. There is a keyboard shortcut for that. You use Control on the PC, so Control C, and then on a Mac it's Command C. And to paste is Control V as in voice, and Command V on a Mac. So I'm just going to hit Control C, and then Control V. So that's how you would get very quick duplications of your shapes. We're not going to do that right now, and I'm just going to highlight them and hit the delete key to delete these. So I'm going to go ahead and put a very quick comic together, guys. Don't mind me while I quickly get to work. So I'm going to put a big star right here, and then for some reason I will use my really cool shapes and put them in here as well, so you guys can see that these are separate panels. Alright, so this is how you would quickly set up some panel lines for a comic, adding your text and then adding your graphics. So that is the line segment tool, and that's why I really wanted to spend some time showing you guys what the line segment tool does. Alright, jumping to our next tool. So we've been using the rectangle tool. You guys at this point I believe know essentially what it does. Holding Shift allows you to get perfectly proportionate shapes. There is the star tool, and it is a 5-pointed star. I'm going to show you guys something really cool. So if you push up on your direction arrow key, you get more points on your star. And if you push the down arrow key, you can get, the lowest it will go will be a 3 point. So you can get a triangle. So this is how you would get a triangle. So that is a very quick tip on the shape tool. Moving on to our Artboard tool. So our Artboard is very important. Hovering over the Artboard tools on your toolbar, go ahead and click it. And notice over here next to your layers you have your Artboard, and notice that you have 2 Artboards. And then you can click on whichever one and you'll notice that the little bounding box lines appear on the Artboard that you have currently selected. This is how you would edit your shape, or excuse me, edit the size of your Artboard. So if you're like, oh no, I don't want it the 8.5 by 11 anymore, let's say you want it the 11 by 17, you would go up here to where it says your width value and your height value. For example, let's say I want it 11 by 17 and I want it landscape. I'm going to hit 17 and you can just hit the enter key. Sometimes it does this weird wonky thing. Don't worry too much about that. Let me drag it out. And sometimes it will drag the shapes that is currently within its bounds. So no worries about that. If you want to go and undo it, just hit edit undo, or you can hit Control Z on your PC or Command Z. And if you, for some reason, decided like you didn't want the portrait, this is also a quick way to edit the orientation of your artboard by hovering up here and clicking landscape. So again, that's how you would get a landscape artboard in case you were like, oh no, I don't want to recreate and then have to copy and paste all my work. All right, clear as mud, I hope. So now that we've kind of looked at the artboard and how we're able to resize it, let's do a quick review of everything that we've went through so far. So selection tool selects the whole object, whatever it may be. Direct selection tool is how you would edit a single point on a graphic. So you can click on the point or you can drag and highlight. This is how you would edit a certain point on a graphic. Going down to our pen tool, this is how we get custom shapes. So if you want to trace a photograph, this is how you would do it. So making custom shapes, this is how you would do it. And then jumping down to our type tool, which is basically how you're going to add text to your digital stories. And your line segment tool is how you would set up essentially lines. Like there's nothing special about it. And then right now I have a line that doesn't have neither a fill or a stroke. So we're just going to go ahead and make it green. So now that we have a green line, we're going to make it thicker. You can push on the up arrow or you can go down here and resize it accordingly. So down arrow, up arrow. And you can edit these to make comic panels to your heart's content. And we just got done going over the Artboard tool. Now that we've kind of explored how to insert shapes, how to add text, and how to possibly make comic panels, we're going to look at some techniques, and that includes the align panel that I had you set up earlier. So it's better to see the capabilities of align through symmetrical shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and move all of these very quickly, and I'm going to bring my circle back, and then I think I want to draw up a square. So I'm going to draw up a square. Oops, that's a rounded square. I'm going to do a square, and let me do a different color so you guys can see this example better. But first, let me just do the circle. So especially when you're making panels or you're making text and you want something perfectly symmetrical in your artboard, so your page, what you're going to do is hover up here to your align panel. And unfortunately, I can't zoom up very closely. So to align it in the center, you're going to click this, and to align it, so the center of this page, if you're going to align it in the vertical center, so this way, you're going to click this one. So now our circle is directly in the center of our page. If you want it to align on the bottom of the page, that's how you'll do it. Align it to the top, align it to the very left, align it to the very right. So this is just an example of how you would get something very symmetrical on the page. So using two shapes, and let's throw text in there as well. And up here I'm going to make sure that it's center so it'll align better. So if I want these objects aligned, and there's a very important distinction on your align panel. So over here it says align to. So align to, the two that I want you to pay particularly close attention to is align to selection I meant. So align to a selection is basically, oh, you want to align all of these shapes based on what is selected. Okay, so let's align these to center. However, as you can see on this side right here versus this side, it's not quite aligned to the center of the artboard. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to align to artboard and then hit the same thing. And so now our text and our shapes are aligned perfectly in the center. So this is something you definitely can explore on your own in more detail, but there is that tool out there called Align that would help you properly proportion your shapes and your lines and your text so that it's very symmetrical or exactly where you need it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and push that back up. And we've already explored what fill and stroke do. So let me go ahead and get rid of all of this stuff. Now, I really want to show you the one technique that I want to go over with you guys is called clip masking. So let me pull this text out of here. And it's easier to see this technique with a photograph. So I'm going to grab my photograph and pull it over here. And I'm going to go and click on layers. And then I'm going to go ahead and right click and go to arrange and send this to the back. And as you can see, my shapes are not on the same layer as this, so it didn't help me. All right, so I'm going to click these two, and then I'm going to go to edit, cut, and then, oops, not copy, edit. I want to go to cut, and then I'm going to click on this shape and make sure I'm on the same layer and hit edit, paste. All right, so this clip masking technique would greatly help out in making comics. Here, let me move this shape out of here. So for example, this triangle shape is very hard to, let's say I wanted to put this landscape back here and I didn't want it to show up on the outside. I didn't want it to bleed into any of my other panels. And how do you do that? How do you tell Illustrator, I just want this photograph to show up in this space? So moving this back over here. Clip masking, you have to have your shape in front of whatever it is that you want to clip. And the reason why it's called clip masking, so I'm going to go ahead and click my circle and then hold shift, and then click on your photograph. You're going to go to right click and then you're going to go down to make clipping mask. So now everything that is not within the fill or the binds of the circle is basically clipped or cut off. So you can't see it, although it's technically there. Watch, if I hover, you can kind of see the blue lines. So the photograph is still there, but you're basically making like a lens. And to undo this, you can right click and hit release clipping mask. And what happens to your shape is it just kind of becomes, here, let me add a color to it so you guys can see it again. It will become with it will come back with no fill and no stroke fill. So doing that with the square, here, let's do that right here. And again, hold shift, click the photograph, and then make clipping mask. So again, this is how you would get a lens to just tell Illustrator, I just want this section of the photograph to show. So let me go ahead and actually I'm just going to hit undo. Undo, make clipping mask. So let me pull this square up here. So how does this all, come together? Here, let me put this up here, and I'm going to hit align very quick so it'll align in the center. So let's say I want to put this mountain scene right here in this weird triangle shape. What I want you guys to do, and it's better to use a very light colored shape, click your pen tool, and what we're going to do is draw our own custom shape. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hold the shift button again to create very symmetrical shapes. I'm going to click my point, and then I'm going to drag it down here, and I'm going to click again. And make sure you're within the lines of your panel, so you don't want anything outside of that. And I'm going to go ahead and click, and it doesn't have to be pretty, like don't worry about it being very like pretty and pristine. And I'm going to go here, and as you can see in the pen tool, there's that little circle shape to signify that you're making this a solid whole shape. So now that I have that, I'm going to drag this picture over here, and I'm going to resize it so it fits the width of my artboard so nothing gets cut off. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it very large. I'm going to drag it down just a little bit. So again, click your custom shape, click on the graphic that you want to clip, right click, go to clipping mask. And as you can see, my panels, my comic panel lines are behind this photograph, and that's not what I want. Here, let me move that back. And all you got to do is right click and go send to back. So this is how, if you're working with landscape graphics, this is how you would get them to be very clean cut if you're going to create a comic with pre-made landscape scenes. So anyways, that's how and why clip masking is very important if you're going to be making very detailed comic panels. So with that, I've certainly talked enough about some of the tools in Adobe Illustrator. There might be some things I've mentioned in this video that might be confusing, so please bring your questions. There's so much information to tell you, and sometimes I just forget something because I have so much to say. But with that, let's move on to the final step. So let's just say I like, and I'm actually going to put some of my shapes back here so you guys know what I'm, for my next example. So I'm going to move all my shapes back on here. I know it is a very keen work of art. Let me put all of my shapes. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And just to delete something, you can highlight it and hit the delete key. I'm going to put a square right here, kind of off center. And I'm going to drag all my shapes back so they have a place to be. All right, so let's just say this is 2 pages of the book that I want to create. The final step after you're done, you like your page setup, you like your text, you like your comic panels if that's what you're doing, and you're ready to make these actual pages that will assemble in InDesign. Adobe Illustrator, it's not so easy as to hitting File, Save As, and then saving it as a JPEG or PNG. You have to go down to Export, and then a little submenu will come up. You're going to hit Export As. So I'm going to have it actually saved to my downloads, and you can title it, I'm going to type Kaylene's Workshop page designs. I'm going to hit, demo. And then down here, save as type, you're going to click that, and I want you to go to JPEG. Now, what's very important as exporting as a JPEG and looking at your artboards, there's an option to save everything within the binds of your artboard, and there's an option to save everything. So typically when you export a JPEG, everything outside of these artboard lines would get cut off. But you have to make sure that you select that option too. So always, now and forever, click down here when it says use artboards. So I'm going to go ahead and hit export. And you're going to get this JPEG options menu. What I want you to do is drag this up to maximum. So these will be high resolution, very high resolution. I want you to go down here where it says resolution and go to high. So 300 ppi is exactly what you want. And color mode, go down and hit RGB. All right, quick review. Color mode, RGB, make sure this little slider is up to 10 maximum, and make sure your resolution is set to high, 300 ppi. So hit OK, and I'm going to go to my downloads folder, refresh this quick, and double click this. All right, so opening up the file, this is what my one page looks like, and here's what the other page looks like. Now remember how we hit used artboards? And here, let me make this a little bit smaller so you guys can see this better. See how everything got cut off on the outsides? So there's some parts missing. Same with our first page, how part of this square got cut off. Well, that's what happens when you go to File, Export, Export As, and you click that Use Artboard. So I'm just going to hit Demo 2, and then I'm not going to click Use Artboard. So export, your JPEGs option will appear. It will always have CYMK. I want you to click RGB, maximum, and 300 ppi. So hit OK. So what happens when you don't click that box? I will show you. I even forgot about that shape that's like all abandoned up there. All right, so this is what happens when you don't click the Use Artboards option. It saves everything in like a huge conglomerate and like collage. So always click Use Artboards so you get something clean like this. So I've certainly talked for a very long time. I can feel my voice starting to give out on me, but this is how you create pages for your book that we're going to be moving over to InDesign. So again, once you have your pages all set up in the way that you want them and you export them as JPEGs, we are now ready to assemble our digital story in InDesign. So I will see you in part 5 of this series.